Welcome to Midlife Matters. I'm Marie, and each week I'm joined by my friends Julie and Mindy to talk about all the topics keeping women in the middle years up at night. Today we're talking about mother and daughter-in-laws. What can we do to foster a loving relationship? What are some pitfalls to avoid? How can we be a help and encouragement to each other? We'll cover all this and more. Let's get started. Hi, Mindy.
Hey, Marie.
Hi, Julie.
Hey, Marie.
You guys, we have a topic that many of our listeners have been begging for. Today we are talking about the mother and daughter-in-law relationship. Doesn't it seem, Julie and Mindy, like everywhere you look, there are complaints or negative connotations about mother-in-laws?
They're the butt of a lot of jokes.
They are. In fact, many women have this worry in the back of their minds as soon as they have a son. Will my daughter-in-law like me? What will it be like when my son gets married? And to add to our conversation this week, we have a special guest, Dede Fuson. Dede is a longtime friend who recently gave a talk on this subject in a women's group at our church, so she's got this topic fresh on her mind. Dede, welcome to Midlife Matters.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here with you girls.
Can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Sure. First of all, I love the Lord. I'm a wife. I'm a mama. I'm an almost empty nester. And I have kids in their 20s. I'm a mother-in-law as of 4 years, and I have a mother-in-law. I do special event styling, and I'm a wedding coordinator.
Dede does everything.
I know.
She does everything well.
All right. Well, Dede, we've gotten questions from listeners about mother-in-laws. And so hopefully between the four of us, we'll be able to share some experiences and encouragement from both sides, both for the daughter and the mother-in-laws. And let's just say up front that the relationship between the mother and daughter-in-law is different than that of the mother and son-in-law. So today we're going to primarily talk about the relationship between the women, although relationships with mother and son-in-laws will come up too. I just think that women tend to have, usually more interaction with each other, and in that interaction creates the potential for more misunderstandings or pitfalls. What do you guys think?
I do think that's true now that I've been thinking about it, but it's so strange because all the mother-in-law jokes you hear usually come from men talking about their mother-in-law. I've never given it one thought, having two sons, about what my relationship with my future daughter-in-law. Never worried about it until we started talking about it.
Are you
serious?
serious?
I feel like, have I just been living under a rock? Because I just always assumed my relationship would be okay. And I think not because of anything that has to do with me, but I think it stems from the fact that I don't have a mother-in-law. So okay. I don't have any of those experiences. I don't know. So I just thought that it was good. It was going to be good.
Well, I'm legitimately shocked by that, Julie, and actually really happy to hear that, because in the ultrasound room, when I was told I was having my third son, I thought, oh my goodness, I'm going to have 3 daughters-in-law.
Really? That is so strange.
I'm so not kidding. That was one of the thoughts in the doctor's office when I found out that I was going to have a third son.
Wow.
I was overwhelmed, was like, that is such a weight, like a lot of pressure. Like, I just felt like, it depends on me. I'm going to have to really do a good job.
Yes. How about you, Dede? Had you worried about with your son Clay, like while he was little, like about what the mother-in-law, daughter-in-law relationship would be like?
I'm with Julie. I did not. I began to pray day one when he was born for his wife, covering her in prayer that she would know the Lord, that she would be safe, that he would use her in ways, those kind of things, those kind of thoughts. And just like Julie, I assumed that this would be a wonderful and fun relationship and something to look forward to. I never looked at it as a weight around my neck. I never thought about dissension. It just never came to mind.
Okay, well, then I guess we're 50-50 here on Midlife Matters.
Yeah. How about you, Marie?
Oh, I definitely worried about it and have worried about it ever since I found out I was going to have 2 sons. And I think some of that can stem from your family history. I know that my extended family on my mom's side was always very worried about that kind of thing too. So it was like from the time I was little, it was always assumed in their conversation that your son would only be your son until he had a wife, and then you'd barely ever see him again. And that was like the way that women talked on that side of the family. And I'm telling you that put such fear in the pit of someone's stomach. And you can't help but absorb that as you grow. And so as soon as I found out that I was having boys, I have had that on my mind. Like, do I only have this finite amount of time to love them, and then they'll be someone else's and I'll hardly get to see them? Like, that might sound really crazy to some people, but Mindy's nodding her head and I know she can relate.
Yes.
I know my mom always said that her mother-in-law just welcomed her from the very beginning. She was always like a daughter. And I got to see that. You know, my grandmother lived very close to us, my dad's mom. So I did get to see that was a very good example for me. And then with me not having a mother-in-law, I guess that it is your family history that can kind of perpetuate your thinking.
Right.
So I only had good to see. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It sounds like we're going to have a really great balanced discussion. So I'm excited.
Yeah. All right. Well, why do you think it is that the societal stigma that you'll have a bad or uncomfortable relationship with your in-laws is so prevalent? Because I know it can be your family history, but that's all through society too. Like you were saying earlier, Julie, there are jokes. It's assumed that the relationship will have dissension and there will be things that you don't like about it. And it's just not a good one that you get from society. Why do you think that is?
Well, you think about it, it's a bond that's bringing women together from different generations, different values, different upbringings, with the expectation that they're going to agree on how to be a wife and how to be a mother. And like we've talked before, expectations get us every time. I think the mother-in-law can see her being older and wiser as giving her justification for interjecting her opinion and advice. And the daughter-in-law thinks new ways are better. I mean, it's just a setup for conflict. Can be.
Yeah. Dede, what do you think?
I totally agree. I think like Julie said, you're bringing two women together, different backgrounds, different things that they're used to, different life experiences, different expectations if they had any. And I think, it's funny when you get two women together in a room or more. My husband laughs because he does a lot of focus groups in his job. And he says you get more than one woman in a room and they can't decide what color their hair is, much less how to do family holidays or dinners. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So I don't think that it's something that you set out to do. I don't think you just walk in going, oh, well, we're never going to get along, so I'm not even going to try. I think everyone walks in wanting it to be good.
Mm-hmm.
And then, maybe along the way, some differences come up and you're sort of blindsided, like, oh, how do I feel about that? Wait a minute, And so I think sometimes we get caught off guard, whether good or bad. And then at the time, depending on the timing and what's going on, it can just kind of be a springboard for really bad or okay.
Right. I was thinking about society and I thought, okay, well, why do I have this, negative connotation that runs through my mind when you think about mother-in-laws and daughter-in-laws? I'm like, first of all, Queen Elizabeth and Princess Diana. Okay.
Yes.
I thought about that. All right. No more needs to be said about that. And I thought anytime two women are vying for the same man's attention, it is not going to go well.
Yes.
And then then the other image popped into my mind. There's a movie called Monster-in-Law that stars Jane Fonda and Jennifer Lopez. And that is just the craziest scenarios you can possibly think of in that movie. And I thought, well, aren't there any good examples of good relationships between mother-in-laws and daughter-in-laws? And I thought, yes, the best example of an excellent relationship is in the Bible, Ruth and Naomi. But the poor son had to die and get out of the way for that relationship to be so great. So I would really like to come to a point of having a great conversation about this where our husbands don't have to die in the process.
That is true. Yes. I definitely think that a lot of the things that you guys have said is so true. Well, every bride goes into marriage loving her husband. And one of the ways wives can love their husband is to love his family. Dede, why is this sometimes harder than anticipated?
Well, I think it's hard because it requires compromise. Compromise on all parties. When the marriage takes place, you're melding two families together. And this makes all members of the family assume new roles. It changes everything. And so when you have compromise, sometimes there has to be give and take, but sometimes one ends up taking more than the other, not that it's intentional or bad, but, it just brings new roles for everybody. And from the in-law side or the mother, of the son, yes, they have traditions and things that they do, and they want to continue that with their son and now their new wife. They want to start memories with her as well. But that also requires the wife to be willing, to fall in line with all of those same things. So I think there's so much that can go into this. That there has to be respect given because the parents have raised this wonderful man that you're now in love with and want to spend the rest of your life with. There has to be regard for the traditions that family has already set up. Whether it's a smooth transition or not, it needs to be at least recognized. And then, time has to be split. There's just so many things that go into it, and compromise has to be key.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's hard not to have favoritism with your own family. So what can both mother-in-laws and daughter-in-laws do to help each other in this area?
My daughter-in-law, when they have Thanksgiving, I think Thanksgiving is their big time to get together, and they have a lot of extended family. And so they have typically done that at the same time, like I think they eat at 1 on Thanksgiving Day. So our family's small and we can just move it around. It's just us. So I say, okay, Kayla, when is your lunch? We'll do it after.
I found that it naturally worked out in our own families because if my family wasn't available, like to help with something, my mother-in-law was available. Or if my mother-in-law wasn't available, like my family was available. And so it really kind of worked its way out because we haven't lived near them. We haven't lived close by to have the struggle of, Thanksgiving Day house hopping or Christmas Day house hopping. So it's really just, oh, you guys are going to be there for Thanksgiving. We'll go for Christmas or vice versa. So we'll take what we can get when we can get it from either side. Mm-hmm.
And I think a super, super important thing to remember is that maybe you cannot celebrate with each family on the day, but you can pick another day and celebrate it, at least at that time. 2 weeks before, 2 weeks after, whatever it is, set time to be with both families. And number one, don't kill yourselves trying to get there because then, you're tired, you've packed up kids, whatever it is. But at the same time, make the effort to try and get there if you can at all. I think the problem can come in when we make our husbands, we make them the middleman. And we have our poor husband, with this huge, separation or a big chasm is the word I use. He's trying to stand on both sides. And we sometimes put undue pressure on him to make a decision. Well, I would rather go this year, and I would rather do this year, but we have to consider that he is trying to balance, and we have to be a team player. And sometimes that can be really hard, and we end up being selfish. We don't mean to, but sometimes we do.
Mm-hmm. I think flexibility, like you said, just being willing to celebrate, maybe not at the same time you always have, move it around a little bit. I think just talking about it, just saying, what are your expectations for the holidays? What would you enjoy? So talk to your daughter-in-law. How does she feel? How would she like to split things up? Or talk to your mother-in-law. She's really much more willing to be flexible than you think, but she doesn't know what time parameters you have available. Or, I think just saying here's what we have available. Here's what we're willing to do. Here are the possibilities. And then everybody picking and choosing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when you ask your daughter-in-law that, you're not necessarily making a demand like, I want you here then. It's just, you just need to talk about it. You just need to say, when can you come? What would work?
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. And it is important to remember to keep it flexible, rotate it. Don't try not to make it where you end up at your side of the families on every holiday and his side of the families at another day. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's hard. And I understand favoritism is hard, but it is important to include both families and to show that both families are important to you. My sweet sister-in-law is a really great example of this. My brother and they live in Texas, and they have 2 boys there. Her in-laws are in the St. Louis area, and they have traveled every year to Nashville and St. Louis, or St. Louis and then Nashville. They take a 10-day vacation at every holiday, and they come to both families. And they are, sometimes if you're the second one in the plan that year, they're exhausted by the time they get to you.
Right.
But at the same time, I so appreciate how she has been loyal to both families. I'm not saying, like 5 days here, 5 days there. Some days it might work out a little bit different. You may spend a little more time at one than the other. But for the most part, that effort just it speaks volumes for her and who she is, and that she places just as much importance for her children to be close to our side of the family and to my parents as their grandparents, as well as to her parents as their grandparents. And it just means a lot. Sometimes it may be crazy and exhausting, but it's worth it. It's so worth it.
That's impressive.
Well, Dede, in your mother-in-law talk that we heard you do at church, you mentioned that there's something called image management and that this has an effect on family relationships. Can you explain that to our listeners?
I can. I recently did a Bible study, and it was called Free of Me, and it's by Sharon Haughty Miller. And it talks about how we are selfish and how we don't even realize it. We don't mean to be. We don't set out to be, but we are very selfish. And in this study, she broke down all the different areas that we ourselves are selfish and self-centered. And one of them was family. And it was Making Family All About You was the title of that chapter. Her point was, grace has been given to you, so you should extend grace. People will disappoint you at times. We're all human, but the most important thing you can do is not make family about you. And she said, image management is you trying to control how people see you. You're trying to manage your image to them. It takes on many forms. It can be very important to you to be successful. It can be important to you to look your best all the time. Anything. It can take many, many forms. It treats everything in your life as if it were a reflection on you. Rather than seeing your family for who they are or how you can love them or what they need from you, we see ourselves in what we need, and we see our aspirations. We begin to put unfair pressure on our families. We saddle them with our own insecurities, and we diminish them and dishonor them. Likely, those diminishing and dishonoring will show up as sarcasm, condescension, and just plain old meanness. Rather than appreciating them for who they are, we judge them. But image management just steals your joy. And you don't even know you're doing it. You don't even realize it. If your kid acts up at the table, is that a reflection on your parenting? No, that's a reflection on your kid. Right.
Right.
If my example to the group when I spoke was my mother-in-law offers me coffee almost every family event. I have been married 32 years, ladies. I do not drink coffee. Can she not remember that? Right. Yeah. Like I would get my feelings hurt early on. I'm like, gosh, I don't drink coffee. She offers me coffee all the time. But what I realized is that she wasn't trying to slight me. She wasn't overlooking me as a person. She was busy. She had a family meal going on. She had planned a lot. She had done a lot. She had games for the kids, all these plates that she is spinning. It's not a reflection on me and her opinion of me that she can't remember that I don't drink coffee. It's just an unimportant detail that she's choosing not to keep in her brain right now. It's not a slight to who I am or how she feels about me. Sometimes you have to let it go. You have to forgive. You have to be obedient to God in that. He'll be at work in your heart, and he will use that in the forgiveness that you can extend for those kind of things as a healing for you, where you can realize that it's not about you.
Yeah, and what I take away from that, Dede, is not to assume the worst intention. You know, you could easily assume your mother-in-law doesn't care about you. She's not thinking about you. She's not prioritizing you. And that's not the case at all. So I think just not jumping to the worst conclusion, like look for the best intention, look for the best reason that she's acting however she's acting, you know.
Exactly. Give grace. She's busy. She's got a lot going on. It's not a slight to me.
It's really hard to get your mind off yourself, even in a big room full of people.
It is. It is. And I also gave in that talk, I gave the example of my husband's family Christmas parties. They have one family Christmas party every year, and that is the one time that that entire family gets together the entire year. And I began to be invited to those parties when we were dating in high school. And I remember walking into the home and people everywhere, and not knowing, you know, very many of them at all. And my husband would introduce me. At that time, he was my boyfriend, would introduce me around, and, you know, you speak to people and they, you know, what are you in school? And I just remember, like, I would be sweating almost, like, oh gosh, I can't wait till this is over. But over the years, I became less and less self-conscious. I became more and more interested in who they were and what they were doing than I was in how I looked to them, you know?
Right.
And so I began to enjoy myself so much more. And now, you know, over 32 years later, it's one of my favorite things that we do every Christmas season, to catch up with all of them. And it has become really fun now, but it took me several years to really enjoy it and look forward to it. So it's just an example of growing in yourself, maturing, you know, putting yourself aside and realizing that not everybody thinks about you as much as you think they do.
Right.
All right. Well, there is going to be that inevitable conflict. And just like we argue with our husbands and our children and our own siblings, there will be disagreements between in-laws. What do we do in that situation? Dede, you've been researching this for the last month or so. What did you find out from people?
You know what? I talked with so many girls, and mother-in-laws as well as daughter-in-laws. It was surprising to me how many have actually had arguments, like out and out argument. That just hasn't happened for me. So that was surprising. But there are girls out there that have truly had big confrontational talks with one another that don't end well. You know, like you said, some differences are going to come up. And whether it's something really small or something really huge, depends on the person. There have been some things that have happened in my family that I was not happy about. And I just told my mother-in-law right then, I'm not happy about this, or please don't ever do this again, kind of thing. And I think that can be a saving grace. I think when something comes up, you need to address it right then and there. Unless it's something where you are really, really angry and you're fearful that you're going to say something you will regret, then I think there may need to be some space before you address it. But just in general, you know, little things or whatever, you know, the grandmother giving your kid too much sugar when she knows that you don't like your kids to eat sugar, or, you know, examples of those kinds of things. But I think it's important to just be a little bit flexible. You know, favoritism is a big one, I think. And when one family revolves around one member, maybe because that member lives out of town and they cater to that member over everyone else, that's going to maybe hurt your feelings. But if you can be flexible again and remember that you're not intentionally being slighted, things are just trying to be worked out. I would so much rather you say to me, you know, Dede, that hurt my feelings when you did this. You know, I would rather hear it from my daughter-in-law or from my mother-in-law when it happens, rather than maybe later a talk coming up that my son may approach me and say, hey, Mom, when you did this, or, you know, my husband may approach me from something his mother has told him and about something that would happen. I have not had that happen personally, but I would much rather that be the case. I would rather my daughter-in-law or my mother-in-law say, hey, you know, that wasn't so nice, or why did you do that, or whatever, and just address it right then and move forward. Let it go. Move forward.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the relationship has to be built before you can deal with conflict. You know, you really have to have a personal relationship between the mother-in-law and the daughter-in-law before you can deal with something heavier. And so if you don't have that loving relationship yet, then it's going to be really difficult to navigate conflict. I think that if there was an issue, like if it were my family, I'm the one then that would need to try to be the peacemaker or to figure out how to navigate it. If it's with my husband's family, then he's the one that would need to try to navigate it. But thankfully, like Dede, I haven't had any arguments or major conflicts. So there have certainly been situations that arise that I think, oh my goodness, like, what are we going to do with this? And honestly, y'all, I have learned to run to prayer first before I open my big mouth. And usually what has happened is once I finally figured out that I really need to be praying about these relationships, because they're crucial. You're going to have these relationships the rest of your life, and they're extremely important and vital. You want your kids to have good relationships, so you don't want to get in the way. Once I started praying over these things, it was amazing how resolutions came to happen. They didn't always come through maybe even me having to say something, but things would somehow work out. And I know that's not a very good answer, but I truly testify to that. Like, you pray about it and you trust the Lord to help bring resolution. And it's amazing how a peaceful resolution can come into play.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let me ask you this, because I heard some other people talking about this, and they use the term blood to blood. Like, you let the husband deal with his family and the wife deal with hers. But I hope that my daughters-in-law and son-in-law will want to have their own relationship with me. Is that unrealistic? Is that an unrealistic expectation that they will want their own relationship with me? Or is it always going to just be filtered through my child?
I think that will come. I think that it will come. It does take time, like Mindy said. Depends on how long your son or your daughter has been married, and before the relationship will come to a super comfortable point. But I know, for instance, my husband, he loves my mom and dad. They have a great relationship, and he looks forward, to talking with them about things. And if there is a problem, he can just call it out with them and say, hey, I don't know what you were thinking when you came over here and borrowed my whatever, but you need to ask first, things like that. Because, girls, these are the things that these issues come up over. It's usually over something that's trivial, something that's not really important. I nursed both my kids, and my mother-in-law did not nurse. She had never nursed her children. And so she didn't understand some of the, ins and outs of nursing or whatever. And we left my son with her the very first time we ever went on a date. And when I got home, back to their home to get him, of course, I'm ready to nurse. He's, 6 weeks old. He cried while we were gone. And so they went and bought formula and put it in a bottle and gave it to him. And so, of course, he was not hungry. I am bursting, ready to feed this baby. I need this baby to nurse. And so I was just so upset. Yeah. And right then I thought, what in the world? But I realized she had never nursed. She did not understand being engorged. She did not understand that. And so I just said to her, I'm sure he was crying and everything, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's hungry. And she said, well, he's so skinny. And so look, Clay was this tiny little baby. He had his own growth chart. He was negative 5% the entire first year of his life. So he was just this tiny little thing. And, when she said that, in my mind, I'm thinking, she thinks I'm not being a good mother. She thinks I'm not feeding him enough. She thinks, my breast milk is not any good. All these things for a breastfeeding mother. I eat all my vegetables, blah, blah, blah. But I just said to her, please don't ever do that again. And I just said it right then and there. And I thought, I am so upset about this right now, but that's all I can say. And I'm not going to say anything else. And so we gathered up our stuff and we left. And that was it. Was I upset with her for a few, days, even weeks after that? Yes. But truly, she didn't understand really when she was going to feed him a bottle. She didn't understand that I would come home ready to nurse. She just didn't think it through. I think she thought, oh, he's crying. We can't get him settled down. He must be hungry.
Yeah.
And so
that's a really good example of how things can get miscommunicated and perceptions.
Because she's probably thinking like, oh, I'm going to make sure they don't have to be bothered. I'm going to take care of this. For her to go to the store and purchase everything.
Yes.
But yeah, I could see both sides of that and certainly remember how it felt to be a nursing mom. So, oh my goodness, great example.
But you have to let it go. You do. You have to let it go. And you have to see her for what she's trying to do.
Right.
And I think it's really important to point out, especially when you're first married, most of us are at the age where our mothers are probably premenopausal or menopausal, so they're overly tired. They're going through their own bodily issues. Things are changing in their own life. There are just things that happen for other people as well.
Mm-hmm.
You have to remember that too, that sometimes they are not themselves as they would normally be. And, giving grace is the best thing to do in that situation.
Well, I definitely think miscommunication can be behind a lot of these things. And I'm thinking about what you said earlier, Julie, about the blood with blood, and Mindy, you saying that the husband should deal with the husband's family. I think maybe in principle that can work and even, sounds good. But I'm thinking like, if my daughter-in-law, her name's Maddie, if she has a problem with something that I'm doing and she tells Davis to tell me, well, Davis is not going to say that in a gentle way, maybe, or he's not going to convey the emotion, like the right emotion,
Right.
or he's not going to say it in the way that she wanted to come across. So it's like a game of telephone. She's told it to
Right.
Davis, and then Davis is going to tell it to me. Well, it's different than how it came out of Maddie's mouth. And then
Right.
I'm supposed to tell Davis my response, and then Davis tells it to Maddie. That's going to get mixed up. Like, it's not
Right.
going to be the same. And so I think some issues maybe, but many of them would be better dealt with face to face, because I think the meaning and the context and the tone is going to come across better than leaving a man in the middle.
Yeah, I agree.
I
I
totally agree.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. At the same time, I think, you don't know when, you know your child and you know how they were raised and you know how you and your husband dealt with conflict in the home. Okay. Not everyone deals with conflict the same. In fact, pretty much no two people will necessarily deal with conflict the same. And we've talked about this. When you get married, you each bring your own baggage of how you handle conflict. So what if your new daughter-in-law comes into the marriage and she's not used to talking things through? You know what I mean? Like maybe she's not comfortable, or that's not how her family portrayed it. I mean, you're trying to meld this new family, and to deal with conflict, there has to be trust built before the conflict happens, to have a good trusting relationship. Trust doesn't happen overnight. So, I mean, that can be really difficult. Even though, like, I agree with you, Marie, I would want my future daughter-in-law to be close enough that I would want her to just come to me and tell me. At the same time, you can't force trust. You can't force that. So
I guess if at all
yes.
possible.
Yes. Situations can become harder than they have to be sometimes because we just mull it over. And, sometimes they just, you create a bigger chasm. The silent treatment, for instance, if that's how you react to something that's done, you've been hurt. And, that's not right for you. That's not fair for you to have been hurt. But you can't bottle up all of that hurt and take on the silent treatment. Like, you've hurt me and this relationship is not the same. And I am done. I'm done. I'm not going to try. I'm just over it. And I'm moving on. I'm only here out of obligation or whatever. And that shows. It shows. Your body language shows. If your mother-in-law tries to call you and you don't call her back, in the day of telephones like we have today, a text or a phone call, there's no excuse for it anymore. You know what I'm saying? Yes, you might be at work, or yes, you might have been doing something when your call came, but there's no excuse not to return it at some point. When you're trying to heal your own hurts, nurse your own wounds, sometimes bottling up and giving the silent treatment is the worst thing you can do. The wound deepens, it begins to fester, the roots go bitter and deep, and nothing is solved when communication is avoided. However you choose to work things out, they need to be worked out sooner than later.
It does.
If you care more about I'm right and you are wrong, than you do about being relational and bridging this gap between the two parties, then you're never going to solve your issue. You're never going to solve it. And it's a sad, sad thing. When it comes down to it, do you care more about being right or more about being in a relationship with your family?
Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about what happens when children are added. Dede, what did you find out in your research about how children change the dynamic between mother-in-laws and daughter-in-laws?
I am so excited to be a grandmother. I did look forward to that. I did have forethought about that in my mind, and I just could not wait. And so, I think that those little precious babies, those little things that come along that we all want to ooh and goo and love on and snuggle up, I think it's just more to enjoy. Sometimes it can bridge a gap. It gives you a commonality that you didn't have before. And so you always have something to talk about. It's common ground for everybody. And what a blessing to see your son or your daughter and your daughter-in-law or son-in-law become parents. It's just such a sweet thing to see them make that transition together and to identify with what they're going through. And it can also change the dynamic if you're very opinionated. Life is different today. These kids have monitors that do the heart rate. They have all of these things, it's crazy what they know now about their babies while they're sleeping. I laid mine in the bed and walked out of the room. You didn't see him till the next morning. You know what I'm saying? There are so many more bells and whistles today. The thing that can happen if you're constantly saying, well, when my babies were little, we did this or blah, blah, blah. Well, so-and-so wouldn't eat her carrots and we tried this. Have you tried to potty train yet? These are all push buttons. Leave it alone. Leave it alone. Go and play, go and love, go and help fold laundry, whatever it is that you can do as a mother-in-law to help or as a mom, to help, do that. But sometimes you can say something that can be misconstrued and then there goes the train. If you make a comment about, do you want me to help you with this laundry? The train may have already taken off. Oh my gosh, she thinks I'm a slob. She doesn't understand that I was up till 2 a.m. rocking the baby. And that's not what the mother-in-law meant at all, or the mother.
Right.
She may just mean, in her mind, she's thinking, oh, I know she's tired. This is something I can help her with.
Yeah.
Right.
Let me, so sometimes you just have to be careful and navigate those situations differently. The flip side, or another part of that, is, if you have so many instructions, okay, he has a peanut allergy, so you can't do this, this, and this, and bedtime is at 8:00. You need to get him in the bath before 7:30, because by the time he has a bath, and you need to read at least a couple of books, and then, we leave a nightlight on, and then we turn the fan on in the bathroom, and then, the mother or mother-in-law can be so afraid that she's going to leave a step out or make a mistake that you're never going to have her babysit again. You have given her a laundry list of things that now, rather than enjoying rocking this child to sleep and giving bath time, she's thinking, oh, what color shampoo did she say to use? And, is he supposed to use a Norwex cloth, or can we do soap here? These are all the things. And today it's just different. And so I think that as a mother or mother-in-law, we all need to remember that when that first baby comes along, those new parents assume that that's the first baby ever in the entire world and that you don't know anything. And they don't mean to be insulting to you. It's new for them.
Right.
And they're navigating it the only way they know how. And so they want to be sure that everything is done right. Right. Now, the second kid comes along, you're a little more relaxed. You don't, maybe they don't get to bed until 8:45. It's okay. Blah, blah, blah. Maybe they don't get a bath that night. Brush their tooth. Where's their toothbrush? We don't even know where it is. You begin to relax a little more. Right. You're not so particular on everything being A, B, C, and D. The third kid comes along, fourth, fifth for you. Some of you girls, it's a wonder that kid ever gets breakfast.
Right.
You just relax so much more.
Yes.
And then you begin, I think at that point, you begin to enjoy your children so much more.
Right.
When you can just relax. And as an in-law or a mother, you also begin to relax more. And then as all of that melds together, it just is better. It just is better. So, number one, it's a sweet, precious time. Number two, you have to be careful with what you say and what you do. And number three, just be present. When they want you there to help, be present. When they don't want you there, go home.
That's right.
I think this is a point sometimes when so many young mamas and daddies use the word boundaries. We've had to establish boundaries. And if I heard that once, I heard it a million times in all of these talks that I had with different moms and different, mother-in-laws and different girls. And just be careful with boundaries. You can set a boundary for a good reason if there's an issue, but you can also set a boundary in your mind that you didn't communicate to your family. And so they keep stepping over this boundary that you never told them what the boundary was. You need to be sure that you've laid the boundaries down and that they are clear if you're going to go there.
Right.
And then give grace if that boundary is overstepped. Be sure that you explained it well, and then, stand by it. Stand by it. It can be a hard thing. But again, be forgiving, give grace, and maybe just be sure that you explain what your expectations are and what your boundaries are, and, deliver that with grace. It's all in how you say it.
If both the mother and the mother-in-law can realize, the unique and distinct roles that they each have, and that there's a respect for that role, that it's different, they're meeting a different need, and you're not coming at it from a fighting standpoint, but I'm trying to make the most of this relationship for you. The mother-in-law is really respecting that her daughter-in-law is trying to figure out her new role as a mother. And the daughter-in-law is like, yes, I want you to have this special bond with your grandchild. So I think if you're both trying to work towards this beautiful relationship, then it's going to happen a whole lot more than if you're, in essence, taking or trying to hold tightly to something and not let go with clenched fists. Like, no, this is mine and mine only.
Yes. So, all in all, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. It's going to work out. And, the thing that I think you should be concerned about is just loving your family and spend time together and cherish the time that you have, make memories. Don't sweat the small stuff. In the grand scheme of things, we're all just trying to do the best we can with the tools we have. And that's all you can ask for. That's all you can ask for.
Yeah. Well, Dede, if someone's listening, what would you say that they should do if they do have a contentious relationship with their in-laws? Is there a place they should start?
Yes, I would encourage them to start trying, just reach out, try to spend some time together, whether it's a phone call if you're miles away or whatever. But I would just encourage forgiveness and understanding and extending grace, the same grace that has been given to you, trying to be, the best you can. It depends on, maybe what the issues are. I certainly don't think if there's a toxic relationship, if there is some sort of addiction somewhere, I certainly would not encourage you to expose yourself to something that would be harmful. But if it's just some of these other little nitpicky things or just differences in opinions, differences in religion, whatever, I would just try to encourage some forgiveness and some time together and to move forward. If you can, if nothing else, you can agree to disagree. And you can just talk about the things that you do have in common.
Right. There are probably some subjects that families should just say are off limits when we're together, because
yes,
the bigger the family gets, the more diverse it will be as far as thinking.
Yes.
Politics, things like that. You probably should just not enter in.
Yeah.
In
just
family conversations.
Yeah.
Maybe save those for the smaller gatherings or the one-on-one lunches or something. But, the Thanksgiving table, try to stick to more neutral topics.
Exactly. I agree.
Well, I have to share, Bryce and I were married really young. I was 18, Bryce was 20. His mom was, she will agree with me, not excited about us getting married that young. And she really struggled with it. And I knew that she was struggling with me and with the marriage. So that kind of started off our relationship, not in the best way. It took several years. 3 years later, we added Abby Ray. And then it just seemed like every time she visited, I would have a lot of anxiety. I didn't really know how to relate with her. She didn't really know how to relate with me. Now that I have sons that are older, I realize how she felt. But at the time, I just thought, okay, she's a part of our lives. I need her to be a part of this family, and I need to enjoy when she visits. I really do. And so I mentioned this earlier, but I really started praying for her, praying specifically for my mother-in-law. And I felt like the way the Lord answered was he said, you need to serve her. And I thought, what? I mean, my first response was like, what? Because I had little kids at the time. It was so impressed upon me that I needed to serve her. And so when she came the next time, I started asking questions. Like, what's your favorite food? What are your hobbies? Tell me about your childhood. Like I got to know my mother-in-law where we didn't have that relationship before Bryce and I were married. We were married so young, there wasn't time. We didn't have that. And so by me just taking the opportunity to start asking questions, to be interested in her life, to learn her likes and dislikes. So then when she came the next time, I made her favorite foods. I had her favorite things on hand when she walked in the door. I made sure that she had a very comfortable place to sleep when she came to our house. In return, after that happening, she started serving me. She started perceiving needs that I had as a mom. And, we added third and fourth children. She was like my greatest helper when she would come to visit. I started looking forward to her visiting, but it really took an act of prayer and this journey of just reaching out, getting to know her, beginning to love her, serve her. And now we're friends. Like now we have a great relationship and I'm so thankful for her. And I can't imagine not having her in my family, but it was not always that way. So that's just my simple story of kind of how we navigated that. It can get better if you're struggling out there. It can definitely get better, and it can be a very mutually beneficial and enjoyable relationship when done well.
Absolutely. I agree totally. I agree. And it's wonderful that you, as the daughter-in-law, were the first one to reach out. It's wonderful that you did that, but just taking an interest and showing, that you want to get to know somebody better. I think we can all agree that when you feel less than in someone's eyes, when you feel less than in any way, you're not really yourself. Most of us don't have the comfort level to just totally be ourselves when you already feel that there's 3 strikes against you.
Right.
And so, for the bridge, to be mended, for things to go better, you have to be willing to reach out. And I love that you went to the Lord first, to pray about that, because I think it takes an attitude adjustment on our part to start it, to start it. And we know that it's not going to come from ourselves. And we have to ask the Holy Spirit to work within us. And, there's a verse that I had added in my talk, Luke 10:27. And it says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. And if you can do those things, if you can just remember how much you are loved and how much that you can reach out and that you can love others with all of your being, you can love the Lord first, and then you can begin to love others, because that's what we're supposed to do. Mm-hmm. And in true happiness, I think, comes from doing the right thing. Mm-hmm. But, getting to that point is the hard part. Mm-hmm. Getting to that point where you're ready to love. And, it may take longer for some than others, but I think that that's the key. It's so key to just being interested in your family members as if you really want to get to know them. And then you can serve them in a way that works, in a way that makes them feel special. And they will look forward to being with you, and you will look forward to being with them.
Well, I think this was excellent. Gives us all a lot of food for thought. Let's move into our I'm a fan. And Dede, you're our guest, so we want to know first, what are you a fan of?
Okay, girls, I am a fan of hot chocolate. I have my own homemade recipe that was given to me by a friend from church years and years ago. And I make it up and I put it in this huge Tupperware cake carrier, but I turn it upside down like a bowl. Oh. And so I have a huge amount of this stuff. And I drink it every morning once the weather starts to get cold. I am not a coffee drinker, but I love me some hot chocolate. And if you want this recipe, I have it, and I am happy to share.
Well, what is special about it, Dede? Like, what's different about it than other hot cocos?
you know what? It's super, to me, it's super creamy. Does that make sense? It's, dry milk and Nestle Quick and Cremora and powdered sugar and cinnamon and malt.
Oh, yeah. I love malt.
Yes, it's so, so good and super creamy. And it just, it's not like those packets that you get,
That's anemic hot chocolate.
You got it. But so, so, so good.
Ooh, sounds delicious. I can't wait to get that recipe.
Yes.
I will have it for you.
Great. Mindy, what are you a fan of this week?
Okay. I am a fan of Marshall's online shopping. I just happened to be looking for some couch pillows, and I had taken time to go to the home goods store and TJ Maxx and Marshall's, and I'm just not finding, I found 3, but I needed 4. And I happened to be at home one day and I was like, you know what? I think I saw an advertisement that you can go online now with Marshall's. They even have holiday decor online.
Perfect.
And I wasn't expecting that, but they do. And I found pillows, and of course I could get however many I wanted. So I was really impressed with their online experience and liked knowing that it was at my fingertips if I couldn't get to the store.
Yes, that's wonderful. I've ordered online from TJ Maxx before, and I think that's pretty similar. It's a great option for anyone that loves to online shop and doesn't want to get out into the stores at this time of year.
Right. Check it out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Julie, what are you a fan of this week?
Well, I am a fan of the Blissy silk pillowcase. Back in the day when your grandmother used to get her hair done and have to sleep on it for a week till she went back to the hairdresser, I remember them saying, oh, you sleep on a silk pillowcase and it won't mess your hair up. I saw it advertised. I think it was on Instagram, and I'm a sucker for advertisements. So it said that it will not leave sheet marks, on your face, the little creases, and your hair will stay untangled. So I've been sleeping on it for about 3 weeks now, and I can get up in the morning and just kind of brush through my hair. I used to have a big hole in the back and it was all sticking up everywhere. And I don't have that anymore. If it's fairly clean, I wash my hair every other day. So it's been amazing. And it stays cool all night. It doesn't get hot. I don't have to flip it over. And I don't have the sheet prints on my face anymore.
Yes, I need to try that.
I know. Yeah. That's a great idea.
That is a great idea.
We'll put a link to that one. Did you say you got that on Amazon, Julie?
Well, I was just looking, and that brand is not on Amazon, but it's 100% pure mulberry silk pillowcase, which they have lots of those, just not that brand. The brand, you would have to go to their website. But I think they're probably all the same, and they're around $20.
All right. Well, we'll put a link to something similar in our show notes. And I'm also a fan of an Amazon product that's called Celestial's card holder for cell phones. So they are the little credit card holders that you put on the back of your cell phone case. And I like these because they're really great price. They're $5.97 for 3. If your kid has their own debit card, I know my boys, they don't like to carry their wallet, but they can put a debit card or cash in there. My girls put their debit cards in there. So they're great for your teenagers. And Julie just raised her cell phone. Julie, do you have one?
Yes, and I love it. I don't even carry my purse most places. This just has my driver's license, credit card, and debit card. And when we were in London, I put my subway card in, and you can just set your phone on the subway and get in. I don't have to pull it out of my pocket and find it and then put it back in. It's just scan the phone. It's so cool.
That's nice. That's so
yeah, I love it.
I've never had one fall off. My kids have never had. That's what I worry about. Or something might fall out of it. That hasn't happened. So I will put a link to the ones that I like in our show notes, and you can order that brand if you want. I think they're just so handy.
Yeah, I love it.
All right. One more thing, listeners. We have a little bit of housekeeping. So we have started emailing listeners our show notes, and from that email, you can click on a link to listen directly to the episode on our website, and you can link right to the show notes to get any of the I'm a Fan recommendations. If you would like to receive this email in your inbox, if you're on a desktop computer, you can go to the upper right-hand corner of our website. It'll say something like sign up for my show notes or newsletter. I can't remember exactly what the wording is. And you can enter your email there. On a mobile phone, if you're like me and you hardly ever get on your desktop, just go to your email and email us at midlifematterspodcast@gmail.com. And in the subject line, just put show notes. And I'll know that you want to start receiving those. There isn't a place to go through the website on a mobile phone, but if you just go right to your email, type in midlifematterspodcast@gmail.com, we will get that and we will start sending those to you. Ladies, it's been so fun talking with you today. I know that I've learned so much.
Thank you, Dede, for being with us.
Yes, thank you so much. And congratulations on over a year of being a podcast. I have so enjoyed all of your podcasts. It's been a blessing to me. You girls are doing a great job.
We appreciate you cheering us on.
Yes.
All right. We'll see you guys next week.
All right.
Goodbye.
All right. Bye. We're so happy you joined us today. If you'd like to help us spread the word about Midlife Matters with one of our free bumper stickers, please email your name and address to midlifematterspodcast@gmail.com. Also, please tell a friend about the show and help them hit the free subscribe button on their favorite podcast app. For links to everything in today's episode, see our show notes at midlifematterspodcast.com or come and follow us on Instagram at midlifematterspodcast. That's where we post pictures and stories about all the things we talk about in each episode. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you back here next week.